Welcome, everyone. I'm very excited to be here today with Elizabeth Varel. Did I say that right? Elizabeth Varel.
Varel.
Of Parhelion Literary Magazine. Elizabeth is based in Virginia. And so we'll hear all about this journal today. Thanks, everyone, for coming out. And thanks, Elizabeth, for taking the time. So let's jump right in. Tell us when you founded your magazine and tell us why you founded your magazine.
Sure. So I started thinking about the magazine in the beginning of 2017. And in my previous earlier life, I was always an English major, an MFA. I was always involved with the English department, and that's where I was really happy. And I had kind of gotten away from that. I was working in marketing, have little kids and everything, suburbs. And I started thinking about what are some ways I can get involved with writing again and with other writers. So I started thinking about, and also like potentially as a job, right? So I started thinking about being a literary agent, started researching that, and I started thinking about this magazine and started researching that. I didn't really find a lot of good news on literary magazines and publishing. I mean, at least from the standpoint of actually making it into a job where I get paid. That definitely is not happening. But, you know, I just kind of read these articles and I was like, whatever. I don't have to get paid or make it into a job. And I have a little bit of a reputation for getting excited about a project and then starting it and then not really continuing it, or kind of, you know, like I get it going and then I kind of get bored and I don't do it anymore. So my husband said, you know what, this is a lot of work, and it's actually more work than I realized. But he said, you need to think about this for a while. Like, don't put this out there unless you're absolutely positive you want to do it. And, you know, you're going to be committed to it. So I sat on it for at least the whole year. And I think around November, I contacted Darren Morris, who is our poetry editor. We went to school together at VCU, which is Virginia Commonwealth University, to their MFA program. And he's a poet. That is not my area of expertise. And I wanted to include poetry in the magazine. So I asked him if he would be interested in doing this. And I don't know what I expected. I guess I expected folks to say no to me. And he totally said yes and was excited. And, you know, knowing that I was going to be working with him, and I really respect him. He's a really, really great poet. I was like, okay, you know what? This is cool. Darren said yes, let's go. So I started building the website, and that's kind of how we got started. And then from there, I picked up some more editors. So it's been very cool because everyone I ask to do something, they say yes, generally. And they're all really excited to do it and committed to doing it, even though it's like a lot of work and we don't make any money. Mm-hmm. So we're just going with it. We're going with that. We're people who love writing and other writers, and it's been really great. Like, I love it.
Yeah, that's great. So so you actually sat on it for a year before starting it. So can you share some of what was like some of the back and forth that you were wrestling with during that time? And how did you finally make the decision that yes, this I can't let this idea go?
I knew I wanted to do it. I really didn't have any doubt I wanted to do it. I just wanted to make sure, like I just didn't trust myself that, you know, like my husband said, once you put it out there, you need to be committed to it. It's a lot of work. You need to know that you're going to want to do that. I think I waited because I wanted to know for sure. And it never left my brain. It was always in my brain that I wanted to do this. I was always looking up other magazines, like I said, researching this sort of industry, which there's not really a lot out there on it, except kind of some negative articles about how, you know, literary magazines are dying and things like that. And I was like, oh, well, whatever. But yeah, I just kind of got to the point where I hadn't changed my mind. It was still very much with me. And, you know, I got Darren on board. And after that, I was like, let's go. So,
yeah, that's great. Well, we're happy you did.
yeah, me too.
So what was the thing that was driving you? Because you mentioned also you were thinking about becoming a literary agent or
Yes.
an editor. So was there something inside of you that was like, I just want to bring more literature to people? Or was it like,
Yes.
I'm frustrated with the literature that I'm seeing. People need to hear more of a certain kind of literature. What was like the driving force for you that made you feel like you had to do something?
I love literature. I have always read since I was really little. My mom and my grandmothers both were always reading on the sofa. So I grew up with these women who read, and my husband's mother actually reads all the time too. So I feel like I'm surrounded by women who read. And I grew up being taken to the library all the time and coming home with like a wagon full of books and paper bags full of books. So that's kind of where I started out. I started writing. I think I wrote my first play when I was 6. And that's always been my world. It's like, when can we go to the library, to the bookstore? Like, I just want to read. And when I went to college and I got my electives out of the way and I could just take English classes, I was so happy. It was just English world. And so for me, I just want to be in that world. I want to be with books. When I hear things like publishing is dying or literary magazines are dying, I'm like, well, really? Because that's all that's in my world. I don't know, like there's nothing else except maybe baseball. You know, baseball's getting ready to start. And my husband is from St. Louis. So we watch, I think, 180 days of the Cardinals. But I sit there and read, of course. So to be in a world where I can work with writing and reading and other writers and get that writing out to other people so they can make it part of their world and enjoy that, that's like the greatest job you could ever have.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
So tell us, what is Parhelion? What does it mean?
Oh, okay. Parhelion, I don't like to title things. I hate titling. And I was ready to make my website, and I love making websites. So I was like so excited to get started. And I thought, oh my God, I don't have a title for this publication. So I had to stop and start thinking about, what am I going to name this thing? And of course, you know, you're a literary magazine, so you want to sound literary or respectable. And I just started looking up words. I was flipping through the dictionary. I actually looked up cool words on Google. Just trying to get my brain going. And I ran across Parhelion, and Parhelion, you know, it's the little pieces of rainbow you see in the sky. And so when I was a kid, my mom was always pointing these out to me. She grew up in rural North Carolina and farming country. And she seemed to have a lot of sayings about the weather or superstitions. So whenever she would see these little rainbows in the sky, which she called sun dogs, we call them sun dogs, she'd say, there's a sun dog, you know, we're going to have weather. It's going to snow. It's going to rain. And I thought, okay, this is a cool word. It reminds me of my mom. It's like kind of a little bit of a connection or a tribute to my mom. I'm going to use it and get started on this website. So that's where it comes from. I think it's kind of a neat title because it is about refracting light and sort of the different colors coming together. And they're just really cool looking when you see them. Sometimes they're really bright. There's usually 2. There's usually 1 on each side of the sun. And yeah, that's basically just kind of finding a cool word, cooler, I think, than sundog, and connecting it to my mom. So
Mm-hmm. There
who got me on the path to reading, right? So
yeah, and there is an online magazine, Sundog Lit.
I looked that up too, and that was already taken. So
yeah,
I was like, okay, I'm gonna go with Parhelion. People seem to like it, so
yeah, sure. So you mentioned in the About section that you are seeking bold literature for bold readers. Can you talk a little bit about what that means? What is bold literature, and who are bold readers?
I think that bold readers are people who are open-minded and willing to look at other people's ideas and their way of life. You know, it's just being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and look at a bigger world than maybe what you live in. And it's sort of the same for writers. I think a bold writer is someone who is able to write something with honesty, maybe, you know, about themselves or using their own views that they're not afraid to put out in front of people. Mm-hmm. So a lot of it is just the idea of fearlessness. And I do think that people who are submitting their work to literary magazines or agents, there's a lot of bravery around that. You know, like you have to face the rejection. I hate sending out rejections because I respect that you put yourself out there, you know, and you've done this. And I think it's really brave and I think it's bold. So that's sort of the essence of that.
Mm-hmm. So take us through the editorial process. It sounds like it's just you and 2 other readers.
Well, I have a couple of editors. It's me. I do the fiction and the flash, and I have a features editor. We accept features all year long, like book reviews, you know, things that are associated with writing. We take those all year long, and Rebecca handles that. So Rebecca's sort of like, right, she's my associate editor. She's my right-hand woman, or left hand. I am actually left-handed. And we read all of the flash and the fiction stories. Darren does all of the poetry. I have Stephanie does our CNF, and is that all of us? I think so. Yeah, CNF. Mm-hmm. So there's 4 of us, and we all kind of just go do our own thing. I mean, Darren goes through all of his and makes his decisions, and I see it later. So I am very happy that I have people that I work with who I'm confident in. Like, I don't feel like I have to go behind them and like, what did you pick? You know, because it's always great. You know, I'm always very happy with what they've chosen. And everyone has a little bit of, and we have had some interns, we've had other readers too, but I didn't feel like I had enough time to really dedicate to my interns, because I had thought I would be able to have more meetings with them and kind of nurture them. They were in high school. I just didn't really have time. So I haven't tried to get more readers. Darren has had some readers. And that's helpful because you get to see other people's, comments and their thoughts and things like that. But we all kind of have a different way of how we go about doing things. I know that for Stephanie, she does CNF, and we need more of that. So if anyone would like to send CNF, please do. I think I've heard that in some of your other interviews, Becky, that the CNF is just not in abundance.
Yeah.
And especially good CNF. So I know that she goes through hers. And I know that when she's interested in something, she takes time to really work with that writer. She goes through, makes comments and things like that. So she's not the sort who's just going to get it. And if it doesn't work, or if it's not already perfect, then, see you later. Mm-hmm. She will work with people. And I think that's great. For me, I have a little bit of a strange process, because when I get submissions, like sometimes I read the cover letter or sometimes I don't. It just depends on what sort of mood I'm in. I usually go through the pieces at least twice. So the first time I read the beginning, and y'all who are writers, your first sentence counts so much. I can't even tell you. You need your first sentence to hook your reader. And I don't mean hook even in a fancy or cool way. It just has to draw the reader in. Like, if you want to pay attention to anything, you make sure that your first sentence is on. And honestly, like a lot of times the first sentence, I know whether I'm taking the story or not.
Oh, wow.
It's almost never wrong. I mean, occasionally I'll be surprised that, I'm thinking this isn't going to happen. And then I'll go through and I'm like, well, yeah, I like that. This is going to work. but most of the time it's just not. So first sentence to me is very important. So I'll read like that beginning part, maybe like the first paragraph or two, and then I skip to the end because I think I'm kind of always in a hurry and I'm very big on efficiency. So I want to know if the story is going to work, like where is it going? And I need to know where it's going so that when I'm reading through, I can tell if it's happening, like if it's all working together. And after I do that, I might make a note to myself or whatever, and then I'll come back again and read it later and read it normally, like a normal person. And probably at that point, read the query or the cover letter.
Mm-hmm.
And I especially read that if I am going to take it, because when I'm interested, I'll be like, who is this? And start reading. So that's my process. And that is not the process. Like Rebecca reads straight through. Mm-hmm. And I think, Darren does too. I'm not quite sure like what poetry people do to go through their submissions, but that's what I do. Just read a little bit, jump to the end, skim, and mm-hmm. then I'll read it again later.
Mm-hmm. And do you work with a writer?
So I prefer to take things that are pretty much already there. However, I have worked with some writers and I'm working with one now because, I will get a story where I'm like, I love this story, but like you just have a few things where like this particular one I'm working on or working with right now, he's got this great story. It's a great concept. And there's just spots where I feel like I have questions as a reader. So I know that if I have questions as a reader, that other readers are going to get mm-hmm. hung up on those spots too. So it's kind of like going through it and sort of giving some more explanation or information about different things going on. But I've not had a lot, but I have had some where I'm like, this is almost there. Let's do it. Let's mm-hmm. get through it. So
can you talk about the qualities that make a great first sentence? Because I think sometimes writers, they hear that word hook, right? And they think that
that's really a bad word.
Yeah, they sometimes think that first sentence needs to be sensationalistic, or there has to be, a gun and some big drama. And I tell people to actually shy away maybe from sentences like that, especially if it's not coming naturally to you. So what are the things, I think for some readers, it's like a sense of authority, like a sense that the writer knows what they're doing, maybe a sense of mystery in that first sentence. But what are some things that you would say make a great first sentence?
That's a good question. And I agree with you. Hook is probably a bad word because it's, like I said, it's not really that it's supposed to be so clever or tricky or anything like that. I think for me, and I kind of go on about this, I feel like on the magazine website and when I talk to other writer people, but I'm very big on voice. So for me, when I read a first sentence, when I can hear that very clearly, and I feel, not that I know, but just there, it's like it's a real person talking and I want to hear more about this story. So a lot of times for me, it has to do with what does it sound like? And then, yeah, I guess behind that, there is like the concept of the story. So, where is this going to, this is a good, I'm sorry. I don't feel like I have like I can't even think of like a great first sentence, although I am thinking of Carson McCullers novel with the mute, where that first sentence is like my favorite sentence and I can't think of it right now, that since I'm like on camera. But it's almost, that's just a simple thing that she writes, but I'm like, oh my gosh, there's 2 mutes in this town, and I would just want to know more about it. So but you're right, it's not tricky or clever. For me, it has a lot to do with how loud, like, can I hear you? Do I feel connected to you? And do I want to move forward to find out more about this? I have to say, like, sometimes I'll get stuff where the person is, or the writer is just really starting out with, she got out of bed, she walked across the room. I'm like, no, like, don't do these things. Like, nobody wants to hear all of the little minutia of daily life, you know, like you're not going to get anywhere with that. It's also really hard to start with dialogue. Although I just took a story that started with dialogue and it's really long. I don't typically take, we usually stick like long. I have figured out that 25 pages, like that stuff's just too long, unless I think it's really good. We seem to be more like 10 to 12 pages people, or maybe 7. But in my past issue, or the winter issue, we did take a 25-page story that starts with dialogue, which is like stuff I tell people not to do. So you can't listen to everything. But I'm sorry, I feel like I didn't answer your question very well.
No, that was very helpful. And actually, I see a comment from Judy. Thanks, Judy. First sentence for Carson McCullers: in the town, there were 2 mutes and they were always together.
Yes, isn't that, I mean, it's just, you hear it and it's beautiful and it's amazing and I love it. So, and she doesn't do anything. She just says there's mutes in town. Like,
right.
You know, tell me more. So.
So you mentioned voice, and I'm curious if you see the works that you're drawn to be more character driven and sort of like conventional stories.
I am definitely a character driven reader, and voice has always mattered to me most. It's, you know, it pulls me in. It has a rhythm to it, and I feel like one day I never really thought about the sound of the story and the way it goes in my head, sort of like music. And one of my work colleagues, I was saying something about it, and he said, "You mean you hear the story in your head?" And I said, "Yeah, actually, I do." So it's that voice to me makes a sort of music, and when I hear it, then I know that I'm onto something. If you read these books that are more character driven, then like I love Ellen Gilchrist, which she's not like a, you know, Stephen King, but she's one of my very favorite writers, and she's so voice driven. I mean, it's not about plot, really. There is plot, but yeah, it's not about plot that much. It's more about, I can hear these characters. So, and that's how I write. Like, I'm a very good character writer, but not that good of plot, which is not a great thing. You still need to be able to do plot. So
now, she's a Southern writer. Do you have a bias for Southern writers, or no?
I mean, I wouldn't call it a bias, but I did grow up in the South. And when I really started to read novels, we were living in Mississippi. So I started reading Eudora Welty, who had a home in Jackson. And I loved her. And then I started reading Carson McCullers and Flannery O'Connor. And then I found Ellen Gilchrist and Clyde Edgerton and fell in love with them. I love their voices, and Clyde Edgerton's hilarious. Like, I'll read him and cry. So I do like humor. So yeah, I guess you could say that I do have a special love of Southern writers.
And we have a comment here from Margaret that I often see what I think are overdone first sentences. I guess exactly because people are sort of aiming for the hook. And will you reject a story if the first sentence feels kind of overwrought, or if the writer's trying too hard?
Not if the story, because sometimes my first sentence test is not correct, and I will find that the story is actually really good, and maybe they just need a little work on their opening or something like that. So no, I wouldn't reject a story over the first sentence.
So I'm curious, what has surprised you about undertaking the project of being an editor? Because I also have that weakness for loving to start projects. I think maybe a lot of people do. It's probably a common situation where, you know, it's like the shiny new thing, you're really excited.
Yeah.
And then, you know, actually dealing with it over the long haul and managing kind of the nitty gritty, dealing with emails and website and tech stuff, you know, things that maybe you didn't necessarily anticipate. So what are some challenges that you have faced? What are some moments where you maybe thought, what have I done? Or have you not had those moments? Have you just like, has it been just really fun for you this entire time?
I mean, I love doing it, and it's really important to me, which is why I keep doing it. I'm proud of the work that we do. I, I love, my friend Lita provides us right now with photography, and I love her photography. I really connect to it, but I think it's amazing. And I feel like that makes our magazine look really professional. And that's important to me. And just overall, like the look of it and the content that we're able to provide keeps me going. I would really like to be able to communicate with writers more. People write me these wonderful letters and I don't respond to them because, or I do like the form rejection, not because I want to, but I don't have time to respond to every single person. I also think it would maybe be a little bit weird to be a chatty response if I'm going to reject the person also. Like that doesn't make a lot of sense. But it makes me want to do something where somehow I can connect writers. And I don't know exactly what that is yet, but like I personally would like to get to know some of the writers more, or, you know, like submitters and people that we publish. This was not your question. Those are just things that I think about. So sometimes, the few times where I have felt like I can't do this anymore, my husband will say, "You're not going to quit doing that magazine." Like he at first was kind of like, and now he's really just very supportive. And if I feel kind of a little bit like I'm fading, he's like, "No, you've got to do this." And Darren also, like my editors, they love it and they want to do it. Again, they're doing a lot of work, they're not getting paid, and they love it. So all of that, knowing like I have these people together who are committed to this and passionate about it, that also makes me want to keep going with it. And I think we're getting some traction, even though I feel like it's hard to get out there. I don't know if anyone knows who we are. It's, we started in 2018 after my year of thinking. And sometimes it is a little bit hard for me. Like I like to get some praise. I did a personality test one time at one of my jobs. And one of the things was like, I'm really into researching things. Obviously I researched for a year and I like to hear that I'm doing a good job. And I don't really hear anything. Like I don't get a whole lot of feedback if this is going well. I think it's going well because we get a lot of some submissions, and we get a lot of folks who have already submitted, who submit again, or who we've published and they submit again. So I feel like they feel confident in our magazine that they want us to print them again, to like take their story and share it. That makes me feel good. But I would just sort of like to know where we are and sort of the world out there. Because like I told you earlier, I kind of feel like I'm in a bubble. I put it out there and then I don't necessarily get a lot of feedback. So I would like that.
We have a question from Judy. Yeah. Do you accept art submissions?
We did, but we are not doing that now. I tried to do that in the beginning. I'm not really an artist, so I didn't feel confident that I can really make calls about art. Mm-hmm. And then Lita did come on as an art director, and she was doing photography submissions, and they were really wonderful, but she just couldn't handle it. It was too much. And I said, okay, could you stay involved and can we use some of your photography for our header images? And she said yes, and that's been great. But as of now, we're not.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious. So you mentioned like wanting that validation, which I think is something we all feel. You want to know how your work is connecting with an audience, if it is connecting with an audience.
Right.
So how do you measure the success of your magazine? And also, are you seeing changes? Are you seeing more submissions? Are you seeing more feedback from people?
So a couple of things, which would be, yes, submissions are continuing to grow, which also scares me because if it does continue to grow, I am going to need more people and potentially a larger budget. So these are things to think about. Like maybe I don't really want it to grow, but I do. I guess, ambitious that way. Feedback in the query letters, you know, people will say that they loved this, or they saw that, or they love how the magazine looks. You know, I'll get some feedback from people who submit, which is really nice. I'm like, oh, good. I know as a reader and an editor that we're publishing good work. Mm-hmm. So I feel confident about that. And I feel like the work is getting better and better. And we're starting to get some writers who are established, you know. Mm-hmm. We've had some really great fiction writers and poets. So I know that that's all good. Like I know it's in a good place. It would just be nice to kind of know that people know that you're out there. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know, that's why I ask you, like, how do you get on these lists? Like, how do you get in front of people? Mm-hmm. And I will also just add really quick, which this may be a question, but you know, you did the article on places where you can publish when you're 50 or older. Oh, yeah. So that made me go look at our stuff. And because I was curious, I'm like, who am I publishing? And I feel like we have a really good age range. I mean, I have actually published a couple of high school students. I have college students, graduate students, and then people of every age up into like 80s or 90s. So I feel like we have a really good range, and we certainly publish older people, you know. I mean, we're not all spring chickens at my magazine. So to me, I'm like, oh, is that like a thing, is to be 50? But yeah, like we're open to pretty much any age, and we're publishing these people. So we don't have any weird, like, you've got to be 21 or anything like that.
That's great. And we have a comment from Margaret that a Facebook friend of hers published a story with you, Mary Grimm. And so she shared, so I guess people are publishing with you, and then they share their work, and bit by bit, the news gets out about the magazine.
I love Mary Grimm. She is a good example of stuff that I'm drawn to. I really like stuff about kids and teenagers, and I guess sort of young adult, or maybe some dark stuff. But I really like, we published, I think, Flash from her a while back, and then just published her again because I got it. I was like, oh, it's Mary Grimm, I'm going to have to take it. Because I don't want to like keep publishing people over and over, right? Like I tried, but it's been a while. So I'm like, okay, this is good timing. So she's a good example of stuff that I am drawn to. And she's not Southern.
Oh, that's great. Okay. It's not great that she's not Southern. Kind of work editors like. So you mentioned that you're sort of working in a bubble, and I'm curious, or that you feel in some way that you're isolated from other editors and sort of the literary world. And I'm curious if that's a conscious choice, or if you just haven't kind of made your way to AWP or whatever, you know.
That is true. I have not done that. Rebecca, our features editor, she's going to be at AWP this year. And I do have my one literary magazine editor friend here, Lindsay Chudzik, who does Field Blind Literary. So it's nice to have a literary magazine editor friend who's not on my magazine, to sort of hear what they're doing, or like how they do things and stuff like that, and exchange ideas. And you know, I know what she's shooting for. And so that's nice. It's nice to have a friend. But yeah, like I just don't know where you go to find. And then I also, when I was at school, Mary Flynn is the editor of Blackbird. And so I had interned for her when she was doing New Virginia Review. So I know Mary, but I just don't see her very much, you know. And I guess as far as where people hang out online, I guess they're on Twitter. I don't really tweet that much, but Rebecca's been doing the social media. So maybe I need to do that.
Not necessarily. I mean, yeah, it's tricky to know like how much outreach to do. Is it actually having any effect? Are you building community? Are you just wasting your time? Do you guys host readings or anything that sort of bring the writers and editors together? We
have not, or at least, I mean, we have an event here called the RVA Lit Walk, which I'm actually the director of, where for a weekend we get together all of these writers and they read at different venues. So, we were planning to do that. And actually we did do the first one, or we had readers at that. But then we had the pandemic. So we haven't had anything, in person. And I just couldn't handle doing a bunch of trying to figure out how to get all these people to read on Zoom, or how to that was just like too big for me to think about. I also work full time. I have 4 kids, a dog. So I also have my like other life. And sometimes I'm just tired. So
can I ask, what is your day job?
I work in marketing. So, and right now I'm doing more editing than writing, but I've done copywriting for a long time. Copywriting has trained me to write with as few words as you could ever imagine, because the client always wants to say so much in 5 words. So that's truly a place to learn how to cull down your writing. Very Hemingway.
So it truly is a labor of love for you to maintain the literary mag. So you're working full time, you have 4 kids. And so this is just something that you're doing to put literature out in the world and to have a connection to great stories. Because I think that's the case for most magazines, but there is also like a professional, you're putting it on your resume, there's a professional development component. But in your case, it sounds like you're like really just in it for the journal and to get stories out into the world.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I feel like that's where I am right now. I mean, we're kind of small, and I do put that on my resume and things like that, but I'm not really doing it as a way to, I don't know, get a bigger job or bigger name or anything like that. Although, like I said, I do want to grow this thing where we are like a bigger and respected name in this industry. And you would think that I could do a little better with marketing, but I feel like there's a lot of, you need money and I can't just use all of our money on the magazine. So, and we do charge a fee. We started using Submittable because I'm not exceptionally good at organization. And so we were getting everything through email, and like, I can't handle all of these different emails and all these different things. And so I was like, we have to get Submittable. And when I got that, I said, well, we're going to have to do the fee because I've got to pay for this every month. I pay for almost everything. I don't ask any of my editors to do this. It's not their fault. I made it up or decided we would do a literary magazine. So I pretty much fund everything. And I do have like the fee unsubmittable, which I didn't want to do because at first I was like, I will never do that. And then I was like, well, just consider it a donation to the arts. So yeah, I mean.
Do you envision the site changing or growing in the next year or more?
So I have learned how to make Squarespace sites because I love making websites. In fact, I just made a new website for Field Blind Literary for my friend Lindsay, and I can't wait for her to launch it. But I want to rebuild ours in Squarespace. I'm kind of procrastinating because there's so many things to move over. And I know there's a program or something for that, but I just feel, I don't know, I feel like I'm going to move it over and I'm going to have to edit every single one of those already existing pages. So there's a little bit of procrastination or feet dragging, but I would like to redesign it. I'm using a Facebook template, which is okay. I like the features page to look more like a newspaper, but it's really cluttered. So that's stuff I want to do. I think it looks good overall, but there's just some things I would like to do to it that would make it look better. And then I would like to do some things like, I don't know, I actually started asking some of our, the folks we've published that I kind of chat with, like, what do you think we should do? Like, what are some things we can offer writers that they need? Or, like, could we connect writers? Like, what, as a person who's reading literary magazines or submitting to them, what is something you would like to see or do that maybe someone else or other magazines aren't doing? that maybe we could provide. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like I see that there's different places that they're offering workshops or whatever. And I'm like, well, I don't know, maybe we could do like a Facebook group, and then we could do live and answer questions, or just, make it like we're accessible and we're connecting with writers and actually giving them some feedback. Because obviously I can't give everyone feedback. I do give feedback sometimes just to folks that I reject, but like their stuff is, they have enough going on that like I have those questions. Like if you could do this and this and this, like this is why I didn't take you, but you're on the chopping block. I call it the chopping block. I feel like that's rude, but it is what I call it. You were in my list here. These are some things that you could be doing, or you could do to your story, or why I didn't take it. So I will do that sometimes. But other than that, like I said, I can't respond to everyone, but maybe if we did something like that, I could answer questions and, I don't know, like I said, just be accessible and connect with people.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I was talking about this with someone recently because I had, before I started doing the newsletter, I had the review. I don't know if you ever saw that, but that was a website where I reviewed literary magazines and I interviewed editors and posted publishing tips. And then it's funny with these projects because they get to a point you want them to grow because that's the exciting part, but there's also an urge to contain it because you just can't, it's not your full-time job, right? It's not your main thing. So there's always that tension between like wanting to do more and wanting to help more writers and wanting to bring people together, and also just like, okay, this is what it is. I need to kind of put a limit on what it's actually going to be. But it's also like, I think it's an exciting process because you're trying to define your vision as a journal and what you're contributing, what you personally want to get out of the project.
Yeah, exactly. And we're coming up on 5 years. It's next year, I think. Can't really do math. 2018 plus 5. Yes. So we're almost 5. And I do feel like, some pressure behind that too. Like, what's the next thing? What are you going to do? You've made it for 5 years, and your people are showing no signs of feeling like they can't do it anymore, or they're not interested. Like everybody's very into it. So what can we do next? And I do feel like the more, things we can do or that are exciting or expanding the magazine, the more we're going to want to work on it, So I don't know, we'll see.
Yeah. We have a question here from Judy. I hear from you and many editors that you want to see more creative nonfiction submissions. Absolutely. I hear that all the time too. Does that mean people want to read a lot of creative nonfiction more so than fiction and poetry?
I don't necessarily think that. I just think that, we made a decision that we want to feature creative nonfiction. I guess in graduate school, part of my friends were all creative nonfiction writers. So to me, that's just like a normal part of the world. And it's just a different way of storytelling, To me, I feel like that should be something that is not necessarily not easy to do, but if you can write fiction, then people should also be able to write creative nonfiction. We don't get a lot of submissions. We just don't get a lot. Like one time, one year, I reached out to some different creative nonfiction writers that I had read online and really liked. And I asked them if they would submit, and most of them did. And that was great. But I had to hunt them down, like they weren't all freely coming to my box. So, again, like for me, that's just another way of storytelling, and it just sort of should just be included because it's storytelling. But people they're not sharing it, or there just aren't a lot of people writing it. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Just on a very basic level, can you share with us how many fiction poetry submissions you get per week?
Oh gosh, it really depends on the week, because sometimes it makes my phone ding, so sometimes it never stops dinging, and sometimes it doesn't.
You get a notification every time you get a submission?
Yeah, well, it's Submittable sends you an email, so my Gmail dings, and sometimes it'll just be so annoying dinging, which is great, not a bad annoying. And then sometimes it doesn't ding that much. So it just kind of depends on the time. I feel like submittable, as you get closer to your deadline, they start showing your stuff more, I think. I don't know, because I actually don't look at it. But then I'll notice that we're starting to get more and more and more, especially if it's like the week before or the week of the deadline, then they just start flying in. So I would say maybe like, I don't know, like maybe 500 or something like that.
Per month.
Yeah.
Not per week. Yeah.
No, not we're not Paris Review. So and so if we did, I'd probably be so stressed.
What are some things you want to see more of in submissions? Obviously, you mentioned crit nonfiction, and you love stories about kids, teenagers, funny stories. But what are some things, that you can tell our viewers, like, please, if you have, there's something, we want to hear more international voices, or I want to hear more things about city life, or, what are some things that you are sort of hungry for?
Well, you kind of got me on that, because I'm always looking for, not like looking for it, but I really love Southern voices. And like I said, I'm usually attracted to kid stories. Like, I totally watched Dawson's Creek and Gossip Girl and all that. So I have this thing. My husband's like, you love high school stories. And I'm like, yeah, I guess so. And I like kind of dark stuff like that. Not horribly dark, but kind of sort of like a dark undertone, like Mary Grimm pulls that off very well. I don't know. I mean, I would like to see, I guess, different, trying to think. I feel like we get such a variety of different types of writing. I can't even say that, because I was going to say maybe just like different areas of life. And this is kind of basic, because I'm thinking like country or city or international or whatever, but we actually get a lot of that. So I'm not sure exactly.
Stories.
Yeah.
What about maybe things you want to see less of? Like, we're all set. Even you mentioned stories starting with people getting out of bed in the morning. So it could be subject matter, or it could be like stylistically, like, please, we had one editor who said, like, spare us the kind of MFA story, this kind of like perfectly crafted sort of a cliche idea about the MFA story, right? But I think it does exist, this sort of like perfectly crafted story that doesn't quite have like
it's too pretty.
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't have the soul in it.
Yeah.
I feel bad about saying that, the thing about starting off with the saying everything that the person's going to do, because what you have there is just a writer who's not especially experienced, and they are submitting, which I think is a very brave thing to do. So I think that we do get, maybe because we're new, we're fairly new, I'll get not like a majority of writers who seem like they're new, but I can tell, although sometimes they'll scare me a little bit. They'll be like, I quit my job and I'm writing now. I'm like, oh no. Maybe I should provide some classes online. And because it's just, I don't know if it's like, when you read a lot, I feel like if you're a reader, you kind of almost automatically know how to do some of these things. And then there's books you can read that can help you hone that a little bit. Like, you don't even need to do MFA. You've done all this reading, you get some books on craft, let's go. So there's just some writers who are not very experienced, but I do appreciate they're putting it out there. So I think for me, okay, so we don't really when I picture our magazine, I picture, like, if you're at the bookstore, I picture it as being in the fiction section. You wouldn't find it in romance or detective and things like that. I do get some of those. And for me, I'm like, okay, A, you haven't looked at the magazine, because if you did, you would know we don't publish any of that. So I would kind of like to not get that kind of stuff anymore. It stresses me out a little bit, because sometimes it's repeat submitters. I'm like, why is this person keep sending me romance? You know, like, I'm not ever going to publish that. I guess I should also just tell them, like, hey, you know, thanks for submitting. So I'd like to move away from that. I don't, you know, you were talking to, is it West Branch, that the editor you did recently, and she was talking about people saying they weren't going to take a certain kind of story, like a story where people had cancer or whatever. And a lot of times, like, I want writers to remember that this experience is very subjective, because for me, like, my mom did have cancer and my dad also had an illness. And so I don't like getting sick stories. I will read it. But you know, unless it's really amazing, it's not going to probably end up in our magazine, because for me, it's just kind of depressing and I don't want to relive any of that. So actually, if it's really good, I may like it even less. So there's sometimes some things going on that you may not know that the editor has, in, you know, in their past, or just is uncomfortable with. Because again, you know, people are always wondering why they got rejected, and I do think it's very subjective, and I think that there's things going on you don't always know. So that's something to keep in mind. I have asked people to not kill their characters, and I felt a little bad about this, but like every couple of submission calls, I will say, do not kill your character, you know, like, do not kill the main character. Because when I was in grad school, I remember my advisor, Tom, we were having class, and he said, do not kill your characters. You know, like, there are other things you can do with characters besides kill them. And we all want to kill them. I mean, and obviously there's plenty of good stories and books and television shows and movies, people get killed. But what I was finding was that every story I had killed a character, and I started to think of them as in a cemetery. Like, I had this vast cemetery of dead characters. And I just started putting, like, I prefer not to receive stories where you kill your character. I just wanted to challenge people to think about writing something else where somebody didn't have to die, you know, from either action adventure or illness or whatever. Don't kill them. And I think that's hard. Like, I think it's easy to kill your character as a wrap up, you know? So.
Yeah. This is really interesting, because it sounds like your magazine is just, it's like you're just publishing stories that you love. Like, there's no, I mean, obviously it is the best, it's high quality work, but it's not necessarily representative of like, I think some lit mags, their purpose is to sort of curate what's happening in the literary scene, and it's like the best of what people are working on in a lot of these programs, MFA programs, and so on. It's like, but for you, it's like a personal project where you're just sort of putting out work that you personally really love.
I guess you could say that. When we started, I was really hesitant to have any sort of boundaries, because I didn't know if anyone would submit. That's another thing. Like, you put a magazine out there, I'm like, what if no one submits? And like, what if we have nothing to publish? And that didn't happen. But I was really hesitant to say we're going to publish this kind of fiction or this kind of poetry. Like, again, I'll mention my friend Lindsay. She publishes all fiction by women. And she is very into service and giving back to the community, and her magazine centers around that. And sometimes I feel very jealous, because she has a single point that she is trying to achieve. I don't have that. So sometimes I have a hard time writing the opening, because my things aren't, I mean, across the board with my different editors and my own stuff, they don't always necessarily have anything to do with each other. We don't have a theme. This is the best of what we got. This is what we loved, and this is like the best of it. And so yeah, I mean, I do read like I think you posted a link this in your past newsletter where it was like somebody had their top 10 magazines, which of course we were not on. And but I was looking through them, you know, and each paragraph would talk about what this magazine published. And I asked Rebecca, our features editor, I'm like, what am I going to say when Becky asks us what do we publish? Like, what is our theme or our center? And she said, you know, just we focus on voice. Like, we're very voice driven, and we do, you know, this wide variety of ages and styles and things like that. So that's kind of where we are. I don't have a center, and I don't know if that's good or bad. I was hoping when we started, we would go Southern, right? Or eventually narrow down into being more Southern lit. But I have enjoyed getting stories from everywhere across the country and internationally so much that I have no desire to even, like, you know, pull it down into, oh, it's just the South, because, you know, I figured out that that's not the whole world. Like, there's so much more out there and I just really enjoy. So yeah, we're kind of open-ended, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. So are you guys open for submissions year round?
No, I usually open for submissions for like 3 months and then close it and try to get everything done to put the magazine out. I feel stressed getting submissions when I'm working on the magazine. Like, I don't want anything else to come in because I'm trying to deal with what I already have. And so once I put it out, then the next month I'll open up again. So I think I published in February. I think I just opened in March for June/July, whichever one I can manage to hit. And in April, we opened up for Halloween. We do have a Halloween themed issue. Although when I started this with Darren, he said no themes like Halloween. And then I said, okay. And then then I changed my mind. But we just do fiction. We just do stories for that. So I'm opening for that in April. And that's one of my favorites. Like, I love Halloween, and so does Rebecca. So we love getting the Halloween stories and putting that together. And that seems to be getting a following. Like, that one is popular.
So you will have your, just to clarify, your submissions are open now. They
are open now. Okay. Regular submissions will be open March, April, May, and then I'll close them. And then they'll probably open up again in like July or August for.
I see. Okay. And the next issue will be out in June.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Or July.
Okay. And is there a way for people to get more involved with the magazine? Are you looking for readers or volunteers, or not right now?
I mean, I hadn't specifically thought of it because I felt like, you know, like with my interns, I couldn't really put a lot of time into that. And I also have like this sounds silly, but like my submittable plan only lets me have so many people on there. So there's that. Although I am thinking about looking at Duotrope. But I will say, like, even though, okay, so I've just come to the conclusion, no, I am not looking for that right now. But if you can do it, if you can read for somebody, go for it, because that is an education in itself. I have learned so much from being in this editor's chair and also reading for some literary agents. It for me, like, it was a whole bunch of stuff that I didn't learn in graduate school. Like, we didn't learn, or I wasn't really in a class where we learned all the technicals of crafting. Maybe I wasn't paying attention. I don't know. But like how the book is supposed to go and the different points it's supposed to hit and things like that. After reading I read for some literary agents in my quest to examine that industry. And then reading these stories, I learned so much that I didn't know that helps me as a writer. And I know now when I look at stuff, whether it's okay or not, I know what they need to add. I know where they need to do it. So, and it's different than from before I started doing this, like I knew, but it's different now. Like now I'm much more, I guess you could say, educated or informed about how things are put together. And being a character-driven person, I guess I didn't put a lot of thought into that, like into the fact that you need structure. And that's helped me understand that sort of stuff. So if you can read for someone or volunteer, you will learn a lot, and you'll see the same things over and over, and you'll say, oh my gosh, I should never ever do this again. Or this is amazing, I should incorporate this. It's a great learning experience for a writer. And for me too, like it's been very eye-opening.
Yeah, absolutely. So people should definitely check out the magazine, and they should submit to it if they have work that's ready to go. And there's a special Halloween issue coming up to look out for. And we can find you on Twitter at Parhelion.
Yeah, I think it's Parhelion Lit.
Okay. And on Facebook as well. Do you guys have Facebook?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Oops. I turned the sound off. Yeah, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and we're on Instagram, but we haven't been updating that one. So
yeah. Okay. Great. Well, thank you. It sounds like such a fun, personal labor of love project. Good luck with all of it.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Thanks everyone for coming out. See you soon.